Fiona tugged at the strap of her faux leather purse as she hurried through the bustling lobby of the Marquis Hotel. She'd been on her feet for almost 7 hours today, running between part-time shifts at a local bakery and a marketing internship that barely covered her subway fare. The faint hum of business chatter and suitcase wheels rolling against polished tile made her realize how out of place she felt in a luxury environment. The high ceilings echoed every step, and the crystal chandeliers twinkled overhead, reflecting her own sense of longing for something bigger. She'd come to the hotel in hopes of mingling at a local entrepreneur's networking event. It was rumored that major business leaders from around the city attended these gatherings, and Fiona needed a career breakthrough or at least a connection leading to one. She could no longer rely on free coffee and good intentions to keep going. She approached the host stand at the edge of the lounge, where a hotel employee was busy checking VIP passes. Fiona glanced at her phone's digital invitation for the networking event, which only said Marquis Lounge. She shrugged, forging ahead. The moment the staff member was distracted by another guest, Fiona slipped by, focusing on a sign that read VIP in an elaborate gold script. She assumed it stood for the networking function and stepped confidently past the velvet rope. Immediately, she sensed something was off. The lighting was softer than she expected, the seats plusher and more spaced out. Stylish people chatted in hushed tones that suggested deals and secrets were being exchanged. She moved a few steps forward, then paused near a tall potted plant, scanning for the friend who had promised to meet her. He was nowhere to be found. Instead, she spotted a man in a sharp suit quietly observing the crowd. There was a disarming calm to the way he sat, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. Fiona thought she recognized him, maybe from an online article or local coverage of rising entrepreneurs, but her memory was fuzzy. Feeling a bit awkward, she debated heading back out to confirm she was in the right place. But the man's gaze flickered toward her, and he offered a small, warm smile. Fiona's heart fluttered with that inexplicable sense of being invited without words. He motioned gently with his hand, as if indicating she could share his table if she liked. Finding no sign of her friend anywhere else, she approached. Up close, she noticed how his dark hair contrasted with his light gray suit. His tie was neatly in place, but there was something casual about his posture, like he wasn't trying to impress anyone. The subtle power in that confidence made her shoulders tighten. Was he an investor? A philanthropist? She couldn't recall, but he looked important. "Is this seat taken?" Fiona asked tentatively. He shook his head. "Not at all, feel free to join me." His voice was smooth, with a kindness that eased her nerves. "Thanks," she said, sliding into the plush seat. "I hope I'm not interrupting. I'm looking for an event that's supposed to be here at the Marquis, but I might have walked into the wrong area." He flashed a slight grin. "Ah, you must be searching for the city's entrepreneur's mixer. It's likely down the hall." His eyes flickered with a hint of humor. "This is the VIP lounge. Usually you need a pass to get in." Fiona froze. "Oh, I had no idea. I'm so sorry." She began to rise. "I'll just—" He raised his hand gently. "Relax. This place can be stuffy. It's not my scene either. You don't have to rush out, not unless someone kicks you out, of course." Her cheeks warmed. Something in the way he spoke soothed her. She slowly sank back down, feeling torn between embarrassment and relief that he didn't mind her presence. A waiter appeared out of nowhere, offering them both drinks. Fiona stammered that she'd just have water, and the man nodded in approval. She noticed the waiter offered no menu or bill, suggesting that everything in this lounge might be complimentary or charged to a member's account. Did the man have an exclusive membership here? Possibly. As they sipped their beverages, she tried to gather her courage to explain who she was. "I'm Fiona. I'm working part-time at a bakery while trying to break into marketing. I came here hoping to meet a few potential employers. My friend insisted this was the best place to find them." He lifted an eyebrow. "Quite an ambitious plan. I'm Liam, by the way. So are you in the habit of sneaking into fancy lounges to jumpstart your career, or is today a one-off?" His lips curved in a playful smile. She gave a small laugh, feeling her tension loosen. "I guess I'm a little desperate. The job market is rough. I'll do anything for the right opportunity except break the law, obviously." She looked around. "Though this might be borderline trespassing." He chuckled. "I admire your determination. and they say chance encounters can change everything, right? Their banter felt surprisingly comfortable. She caught herself holding his gaze. Liam's eyes were a deep, stormy gray, and for a brief moment she forgot she'd barged into a restricted area. Their conversation flowed from her career goals to the city's hidden cafes to the merits of a seat near the window for the best natural light. Fiona found it easy to talk to him, which was unusual. She typically grew shy around strangers of obvious wealth. But Liam was different. He listened as though her words meant something. Time blurred, and she lost track of how long they spoke. She nearly jumped when her phone buzzed. A message from her friend read, "Where are you? The event is next door." Fiona remembered her original plan, but somehow the notion of leaving Liam so soon felt abrupt. After a beat of silence, she stood. "I really should head to the actual networking function. This was nice, though." "Tell you what," he said, sliding a card across the small table. "If you don't find what you're looking for next door, give me a call. I have some contacts in marketing who might help." Her heart skipped at the gesture. She picked up the card, scanning the minimal text. It only displayed his name, Liam Blackwell, and a phone number. No official title, no company name. "Thank you," she said softly. "That's incredibly generous." He shrugged as if it was no big deal. "I like to help driven people when I can." Fiona excused herself and walked out of the VIP lounge, ignoring the curious stares of other patrons who had likely noticed she didn't belong. On her way to the real event, her mind raced. Something about Liam intrigued her more than she wanted to admit. Why was he alone in a lounge at midday? If he had enough clout to be there, he might have all sorts of demands on his time. She decided not to overthink it. She'd see if his contact proved useful later. At the Entrepreneur's Mixer, Fiona listened to a few speeches, met some local business owners, and tried to distribute her neatly printed resume. But as she navigated the crowd, her head kept drifting back to Liam. She could recall the faint cologne he wore, the kindness in his expression, and how easy it was to talk to him. Frustrated at herself, she forced those thoughts aside. She had important people to impress, yet nobody seemed to want her skill set. An hour later, feeling deflated, Fiona slipped out of the conference room. She found a quiet corner near a large window overlooking the city. The world outside glimmered in the late afternoon sun, but she felt none of that brightness inside. Unsure if she was making a foolish move, she pulled out Liam's card from her purse. He had told her to call him if she didn't find what she was looking for. She hesitated, fiddling with the edges of the card. Then, in a surge of spontaneity, she dialed. He picked up on the second ring. "Fiona," he said, as if he'd been expecting her call. His calm voice sent little sparks of relief through her. "I take it the event wasn't a roaring success." She sighed. "Let's just say there were a lot of well-meaning smiles, but no real job offers. I'm not sure what to do next." A pause. "How about dinner? I've got a business function tonight, but it'll be over by 8. We could meet around 8:30. There's a restaurant called Astoria on 5th, fancy, but we can find a quiet corner to talk. Could be a chance to discuss your marketing ambitions more thoroughly." Fiona hesitated. Dinner with a man she barely knew in a high-end place might be a bad idea. But then she remembered his genuine smile, how he'd listened to her with real interest. And he didn't push her. He'd made the offer and now waited quietly for her to decide. It was more courtesy than many in the hustle and bustle city offered. Gathering her nerve, she agreed. After finishing the day's obligations, she rushed home to her tiny studio, rummaging in her closet for something passably elegant. She settled on a simple navy blue dress that flattered her figure without shouting for attention. She felt a surge of nerves, pinning her hair into a loose updo. For a moment, she looked at herself in the smudgy mirror, reminding herself that this was just a meeting about potential job leads, nothing more. Yet her heart fluttered, signaling she might not fully believe her own reassurance. Astoria on 5th was more luxurious than she expected, with mosaic-tiled floors and warm ambient lighting. A chandelier in the center sparkled like an exhibit of starlight. The hostess guided her to a small table near a panoramic window. Liam was already there, flipping through the menu. He stood as soon as he saw her, greeting her with a gentle smile. His suit was crisp, but he ditched the tie, opening the collar of his shirt, showing a more relaxed side. They made small talk at first. how her day ended, the vibe at the mixers, the best pastries in the bakery she worked at. When the waiter came, Liam requested the wine list, but Fiona asked for sparkling water. He teased her politely, but she explained she needed a clear head to absorb everything he might share. The corners of his eyes crinkled with approval. Then came the shift. Liam started asking about her marketing skills, her internship projects, her ambitions. She explained she had a knack for figuring out how to rebrand small businesses on social media. She had bold ideas about capturing the authenticity of a brand story. As she spoke, he listened intently, occasionally nodding or leaning forward with genuine interest. It was the kind of attention she hadn't felt in a long time. "Tell me," he said quietly, swirling his wine, "why do you think authenticity matters so much for businesses?" She paused, noticing how the flickering candlelight highlighted the thoughtful intensity in his gaze. "Because people want to feel something real. We're tired of empty marketing. And small businesses often lose their voice trying to compete with big corporations. Authenticity is their edge." He smiled. "I like that. I think you're onto something. I know a guy who invests in small startups. He's always saying the same thing: authentic stories beat hollow slogans every time." Fiona leaned in, excitement bubbling. "You really believe that? I'm constantly told I'm too idealistic. People say marketing is about numbers, about data. And I get that, but I don't want to lose the human side of it." Liam tilted his head. "Data is important, sure, but if you ignore the human side, you're missing half the puzzle." A comfortable silence settled, broken only by the sound of silverware clinking around them. Fiona found herself relaxing. Then an older couple at a nearby table recognized Liam. The gentleman offered a stiff nod. The woman smiled politely, but something in her eyes looked curious, almost surprised to see him with someone. Fiona sensed a subtle tension in the way Liam nodded back. He turned away quickly, focusing again on her. After the main course, seared salmon for him and a grilled vegetable dish for her, Liam cleared his throat. "I want to be upfront. I have certain resources. I can open doors, but you should know that your own dedication will be the deciding factor. I don't want you to feel pressured or that you owe me anything. If I introduce you to people, you do the rest with your talent. Deal?" Fiona nodded slowly. Deal. She tried to figure out who exactly he was in the business world. He rarely spoke about himself. He mentioned board meetings and hinted at corporate obligations, but never once alluded to the scale or domain of his involvement. Part of her was burning to ask about the VIP lounge. The other part held back, not wanting to appear starstruck or invasive. Later, while they waited for dessert, a text pinged on Liam's phone. She noticed him glance at the screen, his jaw clenching slightly before he silenced it and slipped the phone back into his jacket. When he lifted his head, she saw a flicker of strain behind his composure. A quick thought crossed her mind. Maybe he was dealing with some big corporate drama. Before she could pry, he changed the subject back to her. As they parted ways outside the restaurant, he insisted on covering the bill despite her protest. "Next time you can treat me to coffee," he joked. They said goodnight, and as he stepped into a sleek black car waiting at the curb, the driver respectfully opened the door for him. Fiona's breath caught. She caught a brief glimpse of the interior, fine leather-tinted windows. It all screamed wealth, but he slipped away too quickly for her to ask more. Instead, she found herself replaying their conversation, her heart beating oddly fast at the memory of his steady, confident presence. In the days that followed, Fiona was busier than ever, juggling her usual shifts while daydreaming about new marketing ideas that might impress potential clients Liam had mentioned. True to his word, Liam texted her some leads, small business owners who might need a marketing boost. She spent her evenings drafting proposals, analyzing their online presence, even setting up free demos to show what she could do. She felt alive with purpose. A few weeks went by and she got a call back from one of the leads, a boutique furniture shop run by a kind woman named Grace. Grace said Liam had highly recommended Fiona for social media branding. Flattered and curious, Fiona asked how Grace knew Liam. Grace laughed gently. "Everyone in the entrepreneurial circle knows him, though we see him more at philanthropic events than at day-to-day business meetings. He's got his own empire to run, of course, but he's known for being gracious in supporting smaller ventures." You're lucky to have his endorsement. Fiona's mind whirled. Empire, that was a strong word, but Grace seemed to mean it literally. Fiona tried not to let that intimidate her. She visited Grace's shop, admired the handcrafted shelves and chairs, and quickly outlined a marketing plan that emphasized the store's artisanal story. Grace looked impressed. "You've got a gift," the older woman said, scribbling notes. "I can see why Liam recommended you." That night, adrenaline coursed through Fiona's veins. She realized she might actually get hired for this, a real contract job that paid more than the pittance of her part-time hours. At last, she felt the possibility of bridging the gap between her aspirations and the city's cutthroat competition. She also realized she should probably find out more about Liam's background, especially if people kept referencing him as though he were some local legend. The next time they met for coffee, Fiona mustered the courage to ask. It was a busy afternoon in a quiet corner cafe with exposed brick walls. They found a small table near a window overlooking a side street. After small talk about her upcoming marketing pitch, she finally posed the question, "Liam, I hope you don't mind me asking, how do you know all these people?" He smiled, taking a sip of his espresso. "Contacts I've built over time. I see that curiosity in your eyes. Don't be shy, ask your next question." She glanced down at her cup. "Okay, I keep hearing words like empire when people mention you. Are you some kind of media mogul or real estate tycoon?" He let out a short laugh. "I suppose I dabble in several industries. My official role is CEO of Blackwell Enterprises. We handle diverse portfolios, from property development to tech ventures, even philanthropic programs. Most of my daily obligations involve overseeing large projects." Her jaw nearly dropped. The name Blackwell Enterprises was all over the business journals, credited with multi-million-dollar developments and philanthropic donations. "That's huge," she managed, her cheeks flushing. "I guess that explains the VIP lounge." He shrugged with a modest tilt of his head. "Look, I didn't hide it from you, but I also didn't want to lead with that because then conversations stop being real. I like talking to you without all the financial bravado overshadowing everything." She processed his words, feeling equal parts awe and confusion. "I appreciate that." There was a soft vulnerability in his eyes. "People often treat me differently once they know. It can be isolating, but you never looked at me like I was a walking bank account or a name to impress. You just," he paused, searching for the right words, "you treated me like a normal guy who happened to be in the lounge." The moment was so charged that Fiona felt her pulse race. She realized that her initial assumption, he was an important businessman, barely scratched the surface of who he really was. She didn't know how to respond. Instead, she reached across the table and gently touched his hand. Warmth coursed between them. That quiet act spoke volumes. They met more often after that. Sometimes it was over coffee to discuss Fiona's progress with Grace's furniture store branding. Other times, it was dinner after Liam wrapped up a long day of meetings. Their conversations drifted from business into the realm of personal dreams and private fears. Fiona learned that Liam's parents had passed when he was in college, leaving behind the seeds of a company they'd built. He'd expanded it immensely, but the weight of legacy sometimes felt crushing. Fiona, in turn, opened up about her mother's health struggles and how she desperately wanted to earn enough money to support her. They found a comforting symmetry in each other's stories, each recognizing the other's vulnerabilities behind outward strength. One evening, Liam invited her to join him at a small charity fundraiser for an organization that provided educational resources to low-income families. She was nervous about stepping into an upscale philanthropic event, but he assured her there was no strict dress code. She wore a classy but simple black dress, and upon arrival she felt overshadowed by the opulence around her. Women in designer gowns, men in tailored tuxedos, and music from a live quartet drifting through the air. As soon as they walked in, many heads turned in recognition of Liam, but she held her chin high, reminding herself that she belonged at his side. They mingled with donors, sipping sparkling water, while people tried to draw Liam into conversation about investment forecasts or ongoing philanthropic campaigns. Fiona could see how these social gatherings both wore on him and gave him purpose. He introduced her to a few people as his marketing consultant, but the way he said it and the glance he gave her implied something more than a professional link. She felt a quiet thrill each time, though she tried to keep it hidden behind polite nods and handshakes. At the fundraiser, Liam ended up in a lengthy conversation about potential scholarships with one of the event's organizers, so Fiona wandered off to view an art display. That's when an elegant woman in her 40s approached, someone who exuded confidence in every step. "You're with Liam, aren't you?" the woman asked, her eyes crinkling with a mix of interest and mild skepticism. Fiona nodded. "Yes, I am. I'm helping him with some marketing connections, and we're, well, getting to know each other." The woman introduced herself as Helen, a long-time associate of the Blackwell family. "Be careful," Helen warned gently, though not unkindly. "He's a good man, but his world is demanding. Some find it too much." Fiona mustered a polite smile. She sensed the caution in Helen's tone, but she also sensed no malice there. Just a quiet knowledge that being close to Liam meant navigating a complicated circle of power and attention. Fiona thanked her and soon returned to Liam's side, where he placed a hand lightly on her back. She melted into his presence, telling herself not to worry about the complexities just yet. The event was in full swing when Fiona stepped outside for fresh air. The rooftop terrace offered a dazzling view of the city lights. She needed a moment to center herself. Her phone vibrated with a message from a coworker reminding her of her early morning bakery shift. Suddenly, the difference between her everyday life, scraping by, wearing comfortable shoes to stand for hours, and the glittering environment she was in tonight felt immense. She gripped the terrace railing, her heart pounding with a mix of exhilaration and doubt. Then a quiet moment, as if on cue, Liam appeared by her side. "You doing okay?" he asked softly, noticing the tension in her posture. She forced a small laugh. "I'm just realizing how different my normal life is, and how intimidating this can be. Maybe Helen is right, I might not be cut out for this world." He turned her toward him, his expression earnest. "I don't want you to change who you are. I like that you can stand in line at a bakery at dawn and then hold your own in a conversation with CEOs at night. That adaptability is rare, Fiona." Her cheeks warmed. "You make it sound so easy, but it's not." He nodded. "I know, believe me. Why do you think I slip away to hide in the VIP lounge sometimes? Even I find this exhausting." He brushed a wisp of hair from her cheek, his eyes shining with a gentle light. "But let's figure it out together, okay?" She exhaled, letting the tension flow out. Maybe she was overthinking everything. For once, she might allow herself to trust that something good was unfolding, even if it felt like stepping off a cliff and hoping for a soft landing. Weeks passed, and their bond deepened. Fiona's contract with Grace's furniture store blossomed into a full-fledged marketing campaign, thanks to guidance and encouraging words from Liam. She saw more opportunities arise. One day she woke to an email from a bespoke stationery brand asking for a meeting, another recommendation courtesy of someone who believes in your talent. She was on cloud nine, balanced precariously with her obligations, but fueled by new confidence. Meanwhile, she noticed subtle changes in Liam, as if opening up to her gave him permission to discard some of his guarded exterior. His smiles came more readily. He'd text her random photos of city skylines he encountered on business trips with captions like, "Wish you were here." Yet he still had obligations that pulled him away. Sometimes his phone would ring late at night and he'd leave the room to talk. When she asked if everything was all right, he'd wave it off. "Just business details," he'd say. She sensed a heavier weight behind it but didn't push. One night they met at his penthouse apartment for dinner, cooked by a private chef he'd hired. Fiona felt dizzy at the panoramic view of the city from the floor-to-ceiling windows, but she tried not to let it show. They laughed over a bottle of wine, reminiscing about her accidental entry into the VIP lounge. "You were so cool about me being there," she teased. "Weren't you worried I was just some intruder?" He gave her a gentle smirk. "I could see the panic in your eyes, but I also saw that you had a genuine purpose. Call it intuition." When dinner finished, they drifted onto the balcony. Liam wrapped an arm around her waist, pulling her against him. The night air was crisp, and the sky above was black velvet dotted with stars. She felt his breath warm against her ear. He whispered, I'm glad you walked into that lounge that day. It's one of the best accidents I've had. Fiona laughed softly. Me too, though I almost ran off as soon as you said VIP lounge. He turned her gently to face him, his hand still around her waist. With a slight tilt of his head, he leaned in. Their first kiss was soft, tentative, charged with unspoken hopes. She felt the pull of his world blending into hers, and for a moment she forgot everything that once seemed impossible. The next few days brought her a contentment she'd never felt, but also a lingering anxiety. She noticed the stares from people when she accompanied him to an upscale restaurant or stepped out of his driver's sedan. She felt eyes scanning her outfit, possibly wondering what class she came from. A swirling doubt began to form in her gut. How long before the differences in their status caused a real rift? One afternoon, as she sat at her cramped desk in her studio, an unexpected wave of uncertainty washed over her. She remembered how Helen had warned her. She recalled the hush that fell when Liam walked into a room. She almost panicked, worrying about how many more eyes would start watching them. Then her phone buzzed with a text from Liam. "Thinking about you. Let's grab dinner later if you're free." A bright flush of happiness chased the anxiety away for now. She typed back an enthusiastic yes. That evening, something curious happened. A journalist approached them just as they stepped out of a business meeting Liam had invited her to, presumably to show her how corporate clients pitched philanthropic tie-ins. The journalist recognized Liam immediately, microphone ready, camera rolling, ignoring the polite "we're busy" from Liam's security detail. The reporter thrust the mic forward. "Liam, rumor says you're soon announcing a major corporate acquisition. Care to comment?" He calmly shook his head, offering a practiced smile. "No comment at this time, but I'll be sure to let you know when the details are final." Undeterred, the reporter turned to Fiona. "Miss, are you part of Mr. Blackwell's new philanthropic initiative? Are you just business colleagues or something more personal?" Fiona froze, words jammed in her throat. She'd never been in the spotlight like this before. The swirl of cameras and the tang of adrenaline made her mind go blank. Liam gripped her hand protectively and brushed past the reporter without a reply, guiding Fiona into the elevator. He pressed the close button repeatedly, ignoring more shouted questions. In the privacy of the elevator, Fiona's heart pounded. "That was intense," she breathed. "Do you deal with this often?" Liam exhaled wearily. "More often than I'd like. I usually dodge them, but sometimes they corner me." She nodded, realizing that the deeper she got involved with him, the more she would face such invasions of privacy. The swirl of fear in her stomach grew. But his eyes were on her, full of concern. He squeezed her hand gently. "I'm sorry. I really do try to keep that side of my life at bay." She managed a small smile. "Guess it's part of the territory." In the days that followed, Fiona wrestled with her apprehensions. She tried focusing on the marketing campaign for Grace's boutique, which was going well. Then something else weighed on her mind. She could no longer hide her budding success from her mother. Her mother's medical bills were rising, and Fiona wanted to help more. The new marketing contracts allowed her to contribute more significantly, but the unpredictable nature of building her own brand made her anxious. She even toyed with the idea of asking Liam if there was some stable position for her at Blackwell Enterprises. But it felt too soon, too close to mixing personal and professional ties. One afternoon, she was in the midst of updating Grace's online presence when a phone call disrupted her. It was from an unknown number. She answered, expecting perhaps a new potential client. Instead, a harsh male voice demanded to know who she was and her relationship to Liam. He identified himself as an old rival with a grudge, blaming her for getting in his way. Then he rattled off personal details, her address, her mother's name, before hanging up. Fear seized her. How did this person get such information? Her heart thundered as she called Liam, who answered on the second ring. She relayed the conversation in a shaky voice. The tension in his silence was palpable. Finally, he said, "I'm coming over. I'll have security check into this." Moments later, Liam arrived with a calm but serious expression, accompanied by two discreet security personnel. Fiona had never felt more relieved and yet more intruded upon. The men asked her questions, took notes about the call, promising to investigate. Liam insisted on calling the police to file a report. Through it all, he stayed by her side, a reassuring presence as she tried to process the sudden threat. When the apartment was quiet again, they sat together on her small sofa, the overhead light casting long shadows. She leaned into him, tears threatening to spill. "I knew your world was big, but I never imagined it would reach into my life like this," she whispered. He wrapped an arm around her, resting his chin atop her head. "I'm so sorry. There are people who hate me simply because I'm associated with deals they lost or competition they couldn't beat. Some of them lash out, but you're not alone in this, I promise you." Fear still coiled in her stomach, but the weight of Liam's arm offered warmth. She closed her eyes, letting herself draw strength from him. For a moment, she considered if this was the turning point. Could she endure the complexities of being with a man of his stature, facing these dangers? Or would this be the moment she realized they were too different? The next day, the tension weighed on her. She tried to bury herself in work, but she couldn't concentrate. Around midday, her phone pinged with a message from Liam. "Everything is under control. My security team traced the number. The threat was just an angry competitor making noise, but let me know if anything else happens." His reassurance helped, though she still felt the pang of what it meant. Was this what her future would look like? Glamorous events, philanthropic galas, but also watchers, threats, and invasive questions? She stared at her screen. In that moment of swirling uncertainty, a wave of memory washed over her. Liam had made her feel something she hadn't in a long time, that she was worth being cared for. That day in the VIP lounge, he'd seen her as more than a lost interloper. He'd seen potential in her. He'd listened, guided, and asked nothing in return except that she be herself. Maybe that was worth fighting through the fear. She typed a response, "Thank you, I trust you, let's talk soon." Then she whispered to herself, "I won't let them scare me." That evening, just as she was gathering the courage to see Liam face to face, she found a quiet moment to reflect. Her phone was in her hands, the screen showing her social media, where she just uploaded a marketing success post for Grace's store. Her notifications lit up with likes and support. That's when she noticed the time. She remembered she had promised to meet Liam for a late dinner. Steeling herself, she left her studio, making her way toward the restaurant they'd agreed upon. On her walk, city lights reflecting off puddles, she marveled at how her life had changed. She stepped through one door by accident, and it had unlocked a new realm of possibilities and challenges. Sometimes, timing changes everything, just like subscribing to this channel seems to bring unexpected streaks of good fortune. Seriously, though, that's how Fiona felt as she took a deep breath and stepped out of her comfort zone. But back to the story. Over dinner, Fiona confronted Liam with her fears head-on, how she worried about blending their vastly different lives, how phone calls from dangerous rivals shook her. She was honest about how it seemed like a big leap from the bakery to boardrooms, from her studio apartment to penthouses and security teams. Liam listened intently, reaching across the small table to hold her hand. He promised she wouldn't face any of it alone. "What if I can't handle it?" she blurted. "I mean, this is so far from everything I know." His gaze was gentle. "Then we handle it together, or we decide another way to be close without letting the chaos in. I don't want to lose you just because my life is complicated." Her heart ached with relief, tears threatening to slip free. He was giving her an out if she needed it, but he was also offering to protect her if she chose to stay. In a moment of clarity, she realized she wanted to try. Love often arrives unexpectedly, and while the cost of stepping into his world felt high, the cost of walking away from him felt higher. But their resolve was tested when a rumor spread online that Liam Blackwell was dating an unknown woman. Fiona's phone blew up with messages from acquaintances who saw a grainy photo of them outside a cafe. The tabloids speculated about her name, background, and possible hidden motives. Some comments were hateful, calling her a gold digger or worse. She battled the sting of those words, even as she told herself none of it was true. When Liam saw how distraught she was, he took immediate action. He released a short statement through his PR team. "Fiona is a talented marketing consultant, and I respect her deeply both as a professional and as someone important in my life. I will not tolerate any baseless attacks on her character." The tabloids didn't completely back off, but the viciousness lessened. Fiona was moved by his public defense, but now their relationship was out in the open for scrutiny. She found comfort in calls with her mother, who, despite her health challenges, expressed genuine excitement. "He seems like a good man," her mother said over the phone. "And if he supports you, that's all that matters. Don't let the noise get you down." The idea that her mother approved warmed Fiona's heart, pushing her forward. She made a resolution. She would hold her head high, stand by Liam, and chase her own professional goals with renewed vigor. Meanwhile, Grace's store saw a surge in interest, partially thanks to the rumored association with Liam, but mostly because Fiona's marketing was truly resonating with customers. Grace offered Fiona a formal retainer contract, meaning stable income. Overjoyed, Fiona realized she could finally start paying off her mother's medical bills more aggressively. She told Liam the good news over dinner, seeing genuine pride in his eyes. As their emotional connection deepened, so did the external pressures. One evening, Liam had an urgent crisis at Blackwell Enterprises. A major tech contract was about to fall through, threatening to harm the company's short-term financial picture. He apologized profusely to Fiona for having to cancel their weekend plans, explaining that he needed to fly to San Francisco immediately to negotiate. Fiona felt a pang of disappointment but encouraged him to go, reminding herself that this was part of who he was. She offered to help however she could, though marketing advice on a multi-million-dollar deal didn't exactly fit. He kissed her cheek before leaving, gratitude in his eyes for her understanding. He was gone for 3 days, during which Fiona kept busy finalizing a social media campaign for Grace's launch event. When he finally returned, exhausted but triumphant, he'd saved the deal. He texted her, "I'm back, need to see you." That night, he invited her to his penthouse. She arrived to find him looking worn and stressed, but also more open than ever. The city lights twinkled beyond the glass walls as he pulled her into a tight embrace. They talked about the negotiations, about how close the contract had come to collapsing. She reminded him how each new crisis tested his strength and how she admired his resilience. A quiet realization formed in her mind. She cared about him deeply, beyond career opportunities or fancy nights out. She cared about the man who couldn't quite sleep if business matters weighed on his conscience, who used his influence to help those in need, who saw potential in a stranger from a modest background and treated her like an equal. But just as they settled into a gentle routine, her marketing blossoming, his business thriving, another complication flared up. Liam's board of directors scheduled a formal gala to celebrate a milestone in their expansions. All top executives, their families, and key investors would attend, along with the press. Liam wanted Fiona there as his official guest. She flinched at the thought, remembering the tabloids and the gossip. But one look at Liam's earnest face made her decision. She'd stand beside him. The night of the gala, she wore a long, elegant gown in midnight blue, carefully chosen to neither overshadow nor underwhelm. Her hair was styled in loose waves, and she carried herself with the confidence born of real accomplishments. Liam met her at the bottom of a grand marble staircase, offering his hand. His smile was warm, but his eyes revealed nerves. "You look stunning," he whispered. She swallowed. "So do you," she teased, eyeing his sleek tuxedo. But she felt the weight of the stairs as they entered the ballroom. The event was lavish, chandeliers, live music, and a sea of well-dressed attendees. Fiona kept her posture poised, ignoring the occasional glances from those who might have questioned her presence. Liam introduced her graciously, praising her marketing success. Some people congratulated her, others regarded her with polite neutrality, but she remained composed. Eventually, he led her away from the crowds, guiding her onto the balcony for a moment of reprieve. The cityscape spread out below, shimmering in the night. She took a deep breath, reflecting on her journey from that accidental step into the VIP lounge to standing here now, side by side with a man who'd become so significant in her life. Her next words spilled out unplanned. "I'm so grateful to have met you. My life has changed so much since that day." She turned to face him. "But I hope you know I'm not here because of what you can do for me. I'm here because of who you are." He drew her closer, his gaze tender. "I never doubted that." He hesitated, then continued, voice subdued. "Look, I know how tough this can be, my world can be overwhelming, and I can't promise it will ever fully quiet down. But you make it all feel lighter. You give me a reason to step away from the chaos and just be a man, not a CEO or a figurehead." Her chest tightened at the honesty in his eyes. In the background, the distant chatter of the gala drifted on the wind. As he took her hands in his, everything else seemed to fade. Slowly, he slipped a small box from his jacket pocket. Her heart hammered. "It's not what you think," he said quickly, noticing her surprise. He opened it to reveal a delicate necklace with a single sapphire pendant glimmering in the soft light. "I wanted to give you something to remind you how special you are, how grateful I am that you stepped into my life, literally." He let out a gentle laugh. "It's not an engagement ring. We're not there yet, though maybe one day if we keep building this together." His eyes glowed with meaning. Speechless, Fiona felt tears brim as he clasped the necklace around her neck. The sapphire sparkled against her skin, reflecting the ocean of emotion in her heart. He leaned in, pressing a tender kiss to her forehead. She felt dizzy with happiness, letting the city lights swirl around them, forgetting about everything else. In that luminous moment, she knew her decision to stay by Liam's side, through the glare of publicity, the occasional threats, the difference in wealth, was the right one. She understood that real love was about standing together despite the noise, about finding each other's hands in the dark corridors of life and stepping forward with renewed conviction. As they returned to the grand ballroom, the music swelled and they took to the dance floor. They swayed slowly, lost in their own world while the rest of the party watched. Some saw a powerful CEO with his new companion. Others saw a marketing prodigy forging her path. But for Fiona and Liam, it was simpler. They were two souls who had found each other by serendipity and chose to hold on. The night ended with them slipping away from the crowd, hearts bound closer than ever, fully aware that the future would have its share of trials. Yet they were ready. In Fiona's mind, she remembered exactly how it all began, one impulsive step into the VIP lounge, and the moment she locked eyes with a stranger who would change her life.